Well, welcome to everyone who is attending this first rental roundup. I'm Kyle Clements, founder and CEO of Quipli, if I haven't met you before. So thank you guys for attending. So we got a couple of housekeeping items and I'll hand it to Patrick. So first of all, this is the first ever rental roundup we've done. We're going to hopefully do this as a regular series, maybe potentially monthly, talk about different topics the audience is interested in, hopefully to be helpful to people as they think about problems, challenges, et cetera, they're facing, and just have a really rich discussion is really the point of this. So this is really the first one. So thank you for joining. Just some housekeeping items. At the end of this, we'll send you an email with the recording after this. So don't necessarily need to take notes. We'll send you access to this so you have it. We'll also send you a survey as well for just general things you like, didn't like, and also some other topics you may want to talk about in the future. This is really supposed to be interactive and light, and feel free to raise your hand using the Zoom link if you have questions, or put your questions directly in the chat, and we'll make sure we hit those as we go through. So that's it. I'm going to introduce Patrick, who's going to be taking this away after this. Patrick and I have known each other for a couple of years, really when I was just getting started with Quipli, thinking about the idea 2.5 years ago. He's become a friend since then. We've seen each other in person, though I'm on the East Coast, he's on the West Coast. Actually lives in the Vancouver area. So he's the rental expert. He's been in the rental industry for, I guess, 10 or 15 years, working at a rental company, working at a rental software company. He now has his own advising business to help rental companies think through different challenges and things they're looking at. So I'll kick it to Patrick. Last thing I'll say is he won't tell you this, but he is actually an Olympic snowboarder. So if you had one of your goals this week was to speak with an Olympic athlete, you can now check that off your list because this is Patrick. That's previous to the rental industry was an Olympian. So with that, Patrick, I'll hand it to you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Yeah, great intro. He even over pumped my tires because I was an Olympic candidate. I was actually one of the spares that did not go to the Olympics. So
close enough.
I took a pretty solid swing at it, and it went really well. But yeah, just to tag on to the end of the housekeeping tips there, you said you raise your hand like for the Zoom crowd or those that aren't. Like, I'm not usually a Zoom guy, so this experience is a little fresh for me too. There's a raise hand function, I think, that the attendees can see. Feel free to use it, is what Kyle is saying, because I think that's how we can address that. There might be a Q&A function in there too. In any case, we've got some moderators, so that's great. Yeah, like Kyle said, I've been in the equipment rental industry. It's actually north of 20 years. I was renting boats as a high school kid, like for seven summers. And then in 2010, got into equipment and party and event rental. It was alongside my racing career. So I was doing mostly like summers and mostly in operations. But when I hung up the race board, then the invitation was there to general manage the company. And so I took the opportunity, did that for most of 10 years. And yeah, after that experience, enjoyed it so much, decided that I think my main interest is in sharing my knowledge and my strategies that I used with the greater rental industry. So that's the pursuit. That's what Rental Wise is all about. So yeah, without further ado, Kyle and the team at Quipli, they invited me to have a discussion with you all, two-way, and it's focused on fleet, like inventory, fleet. I had the opportunity to scratch my head a little bit and think about what are a few higher level concepts that we can apply to get the sum of the result is greater than just the efforts in any one direction or into any one of the concepts. And so I'll just break it down and in the end, hopefully be able to just sort of deliver that unified result that you can expect to get when you think about these things. So here's what we'll cover. I'm not going to read it top to bottom. I'm going to pause in between points and we'll be able to back and forth, and Kyle, feel free to jump in if anything pops into your mind as well. Leveraging data to better inform your decision-making process and improve business growth, plus the metrics you should be looking at. Data, I think about two different ways. Very briefly, there's like big data, it's like the new oil, what people talk about. There is that whole entire world. Right now, what I'm talking about is like inward data. It's like inward to your organization data. What do you have? What do you already know that you might not be looking at closely? And you totally own it, so it's free. There's this concept that I used, and I still advise on, is like the 4-tier asset age index. Is your fleet resilient? Can your fleet sustain a period of time, without maintenance or capital investment, that kind of thing? We'll get into that, each of these areas more deeply in a bit. And then, the age-old maintenance program, like we all know we need it. Whether we have it or not is another story. The bigger companies, of course, they've got teams behind it, but you don't need that to do very well, to even like capitalize on your maintenance. And so you tie all that together, and it's what we're calling the super fleet. Like you have your inventory that's working great and compounding returns. So yeah, there was a bit of introduction there. I don't think there's anything else I need to expand on here other than, I guess plug my consultancy. I do contract work. I do software implementation. So I work with data all the time. I work in equipment rental business consulting. So I'm, looking at the software end of it, but high level business consulting as well. Together, that is pretty valuable. Pretty good value. So here we go. Training. The idea we have here is that we're maximizing profit using these 3 concerns or 3 concepts that I've introduced. Leveraging data, we said, building resilience. So I think this is where I'm introducing the word resilience to the fleet. And then proactive maintenance. So data, lack of data structure reduces opportunity for analysis. What does that mean? At a high level, if in, say, most of us are probably into a rental software of some sort, and you probably have that populated. Now, where the paths diverge is whether you populated it or your company owned and was accountable for, implementing your software and thus the hierarchy of the equipment inside of it, or whether that was done for you by someone like me, and whether that someone like me understands, what your business is all about. Poor asset descriptions cause problems. Think about trying to choose a piece of equipment that has no categorization to it, or your team trying to load a, widget into the truck, and let's say it's a drill, concrete drill, and at my place we had 5-6 different sizes of concrete drills. So if it was concrete drill 7, then they're either looking for the drill with a 7 on it, or maybe we could use a better description of what we're looking for. This is what I'm sort of drawing out, and forgive me, I've just adopted a generalized categorization method, sort of influenced by what some larger companies use, and then I've added my input to it. But the asset category, the asset class, and then underneath that is the asset itself. That's what these are. So a problem I often see is that we categorize assets as rental, as at the highest level of the hierarchy, and you might have beside that sales, consumables, something like that. The problem I have with that is that when you start to use up your hierarchy levels, you started at rental, now let's say we're into concrete equipment, now I've just got a pile of concrete gear in there, and it makes sense because you can open a window or you can select an area of the software and grab what you need. But when you start scaling out, you run into a number of problems. And this isn't the only problem. This is just the example case that I'm thinking about. So when I have the opportunity to help out with the influence in these areas, I start to build it out like this. At the highest level, the asset category, the asset class, and then what your operations, your delivery staff are working with at the end of the day is your asset descriptions and probably an asset code, to be very specific. So there's a whole bunch of value to having it broken out in some way, shape, or form version of this. And it can be different, but I'll just like dig into what some of the value is of doing it this way. When you know what your asset category is, like concrete, the demolition area of concrete versus the cutting area of concrete versus the coring area of concrete. It could be earth moving skid steers or earth moving mini excavators. And then you have your different sizes of excavators. So for perspective, that's how you can cascade that across your inventory. When you look at it this way, the asset category, what's your utilization of your high level category, and compare that, to another area of your business. You can look at your profitability, your utilization. You can look at your maintenance. How much equipment down service call you have at that highest level, and then, of course, just as interesting, the middle level or the subgroup or the class level. Some software calls it the header level. From here, now operations teams are easily able to find it, navigate it. But then if you think about how you're understanding your fleet and its behavior, then let's analyze the next level down. And then at the asset level, if we just use utilization as that example, what if you have 3 units in your asset class that are hyper performing? Maybe there's an opportunity there for optimization, because your team might be just selecting unit 1 all the time. Randomize that serialized or itemized asset. There's value in looking at this highest perspective and zooming in all the way down.
Hey, Patrick, I just had a question on this. Actually, really 2 comments. One, someone from the audience message in just to see if you could speak up a little bit louder.
Oh yeah, sure.
Small thing. But secondly, on your thing here, on the old way you have rental equipment. On the new way, there's nowhere that's really describing that this is rental equipment. So is that like a hidden assumption that everything in your new way is rental equipment? And if so, how do you categorize things that are maybe rental and sales, which is sometimes what happens with different pieces of inventory?
It's a really good point. So what is most often the case is in the rental software, or heaven forbid, we're using spreadsheets, we're going to have, as a component of the item record itself, a flag of some sort that it is a rental or a capitalized asset, depending on how the software is working. So I would encourage you to understand the power of the software and how it is categorizing your equipment under the hood. You don't need to pack a ton of identifiers, flags, like ways of categorizing the equipment into the name. The name isn't so much, the critical factor, because the software knows. Because when you purchased something, say you're using a purchase order module and identified it as a capitalized asset, that it is understood as its rental. So when you analyze it from a reporting perspective or analytics perspective, however that works in your platform, you are probably choosing rental assets. You might even be choosing like non-serialized rental assets, as another differentiator. I hope that helps.
So you can tag a piece of equipment like under the scene as rental, sales, or both. And then when you're doing your data analysis later, you can filter on those things rather than having that as like an asset category, which is sort of redundant because almost everything was going to be a rental piece of equipment.
Exactly. Yeah. We sort of took that highest level in the old way where it's rental and just accepted that the software knows it's rental. We know it's rental. We don't need to consume an entire hierarchy level in our nomenclature or in our schema to that end. A little bit of advice or a little opportunity here. Say the result of an analysis of one of these asset classes, what was that it's extremely profitable, but in your local market you have a type of asset class that doesn't make you a ton of money. Well, why not consider all the additional revenue or the high return of a high performing asset class? Like your concrete cutting is doing really, really well, but your coring is not doing really well. I would expect that you probably want to have concrete coring in your fleet, even though it's not performing that well. So identify that you could peel off cash flow or revenues from your concrete cutting buy a marginal number more of concrete cutting devices and use some of that additional capital to make sure you have at least a minimum viable coring, subclass, asset class, sorry. So yeah, this value comes from analysis and being of the frame of mind to, look at these things on a regular basis, or weekly to monthly basis, depending what you're looking at, it's really helpful. That's my advice. Shift two, yeah, moving on. Resilient fleet, and I hope you can hear me a little better. I just realized my microphone's off to my right shoulder and I was looking this way. So resilient fleet is that term that I guess I coined. I don't know, I'm not sure where I came up with that, but the idea is that when you have a fleet and time never stops, that you want it to be resilient and you want it to be able to sustain or survive, and survive well through market, turns and your specific capital challenges that you have at your company or opportunities. Like it works both ways. If you're restricted in cash or whether you're flowing in cash, where is it going? Where does all that fit in the what I call the capital asset food chain? Again, this is just coming from my organic time in the industry. Didn't read this in any textbooks. That I found a tremendous amount of value in having a fleet that was shaped as far as like asset age in a certain way. And so I'll get to that in a second. I'm calling the tier one capitalized asset area. Those are the biggest players. These are your United Rentals and so on. Public companies, they wouldn't be caught dead buying used equipment. They're just like, the only reason it's low on that very first bar is because I'm suggesting that you might not have all of your current year deliveries in place. But after that, you've got a ton of new stuff. And as time goes on, the scale's not year to year. It's just sort of a year and a half kind of thing per bar there. They sell off their stuff for several years. From there, I call tier two is like 80% new, 20% used. And when you're looking at it that way, then there's a large influence to the assets being purchased on the new end. But maybe the largest equipment is always purchased new, and then you fill in some odds and ends in the used sense. But also the fleet age is longer. It's on average an older fleet age than maybe what those tier one companies are doing. Probably don't have 15-year-old assets other than static assets, like without moving parts. So this is just a generalization of the concept. Tier three, that's where I spent quite a bit of time. I think a lot of us can relate to tier three. It's 20% new, 80% used, so a lot lighter on the front end, and then you end up with a lot of 7-year-old gear. If you brought anything from the auction houses, you see there's like a peak in the statistical number of like 7-year-old gear because those tier one guys are offloading. So I spent a lot of time here. I would definitely buy special stuff, the odd super like good deal, new. And then naturally when you're buying 7-year-old large capitalized equipment, then the ultimate age carries on before you turn it over. Then tier four, for lack of a wonderful way to picture it next to tier one, two, and three, I'm just saying there's very few brand new stuff, assets in the inventory, and then it's whatever sticks to the wall from there. If you're getting great deals, 0% financing, and you have the cash flow because everything that we're talking about today is working for you, you buy that gear, you go to the show, you get it. But after that, where's the utilization gaps? Where's whichever gaps that you need to fill? All over the place. Now, tier three and four are probably the most powerful, which is this like sneaky advantage to not being tied to brand new gear all the time because you can choose to buy new gear And yes, it's shiny, but when assets are of a handful of years of age, depending on the asset class, they're still wonderful assets. The brand new price point on that machine is gone off of it, other than recently. And we'll talk about how it's all part of resilience. Like we know coming up with used inventory these days is challenging, but it won't be forever. And it wasn't in a recent history. It was a very fruitful place to come up with gear.
Hey, Patrick, if you just want to go back a slide, we had a question from the audience. Michael asks, is there an ideal tier that newer rental companies, 2 years in business, 10 pieces of equipment, maybe 10 up to 50, 100, just a couple years in business should be focusing on? I imagine it's maybe not that first tier, but love to get your thoughts for a new rental company getting started.
Yeah, for sure. First tier, that's we all want to have the new brand new everything top to bottom, and then 5 years later sell it off because there's the newest thing. That's great, but I think we should probably, as a newer rental company, 10, I think you said 10, 50 pieces, even 100 to 300 pieces as you move up that scale. Honestly, tier 3 and 4 are the place that I like to dance. The 4 is if you like 4, just all I mean by tier 4 is it's random. Like if you get a good opportunity, then you buy it. You don't want to, what do they say, cut off your nose and spite your face. Get a brand fancy, new, shiniest, latest spider this, that at the show. And then you don't have any cash flow to you go to the used market. Like there's issues there. So stick to 3 or 4. Make sure your current market is addressed. Your asset categories your asset classes solve the demands of your customers. Prioritize the ones that are extremely demanded, and measure every month to see what the performance of your asset classes. And if you've got CRM, your lead management, identify what questions are being asked and where are you not delivering. So hopefully that's sort of helpful. Tier 3, tier 4, pick and choose. Be okay with a fleet that's aging into 7, 10, 12, 15 years. 15-year-old gear is hopefully static gear. Your diesel equipment you don't want to have getting on. Diesel. The old diesel equipment was great. You could have 40-year-old diesel equipment, but these days it's a little.
Things have changed a little bit. I just have one more. My own follow-up question is, with rising interest rates, the cost of borrowing is going up. How does that generally change how rental companies should think about the different tiers here?
Yeah, interest rates are the top topic of mind, top of the attention tree right now. The whole thing with resilient fleet is like having a fleet that you can manage your cash flow. If you're bootstrapping it and you're out of cash, it's too late, so to speak. Like you got to be really careful that you can buy stuff with cash. Go to your bank, go to your lenders, like go to 3 lenders. Like this is the advice that my predecessors gave me years ago. Just make sure you're getting 3 prices. Like there's more than one way than you manufacturer financing to get, you can get fleet financing, like a line of credit for everything that is rental. Consider all these options. Interest rates are, they're painful. Probably means you can't finance everything at 10%. So lean into tier 4, lean into tier 3, get into the used market, use some cash. It's real value. It's like cash is real. It's hard. There isn't an interest rate attached to it other than lost opportunity from not having assets. If you're turning 100% return on your investment in a year, which you will on a lot of asset classes, 3 years and others, by the time this interest rate headache is over, you're going to have returned all of your cash back.
It reminds me that the statement profit is theory, cash is fact, and inflationary times, like you probably want to move more towards tiers 3 and 4. You get more bang for your buck. And we did actually one more question from Dustin. He asked, is any reason to adjust rates based on your average age of fleet? Should I expect to make less revenue if I have older units? So this is more of a pricing question.
I missed sort of the beginning of it, but the tail end there was, you're going to expect less revenue? Is that what you said?
Yeah, so essentially, like, how should someone consider changing their prices based on the average age of their fleet? Should I expect to make less revenue if I have
Ah,
units?
that's a great question. My personal opinion is no. What the We'll say what the tier one in general, we can get into these things, and of course, like down the road, I could talk to you, Dustin, but in general, what the big guys have and what they flaunt is the shiny equipment, and they're flexible on their rates and the brand. That's their whole shtick. What the independents, what the many location tier 2, 3, and 4. That's probably the best way to phrase it. Tiers 2, 3, and 4, you can kill them with kindness. I don't mean to be aggressive. I just mean, like, in the turn of phrase, use service standards. There's value to service. Like, the race to the bottom on prices is killer. It'll ruin your return on revenue like so fast, and especially if you're trying to keep up to a competitive pricing environment with the tier ones, you need to step back, look at the user interface that not only your customers have. How do they reach out? What are their touch points to you? How inviting are you? How can you say yes to their lead opportunities? And then internally, as a matter of efficiency, what are your employees dealing with for user interfaces? That's like a software plug. It's like if your user interface for your internal team allows your internal team to say yes to the external leads that are coming in easier, faster, more efficiently, then you're going to find that you're going to be able to overall produce more revenue across all of your fleet. And your customers are going to be able to say yes to your opportunities. Like if the equipment is getting old, enter strategy number 3, which is pending here. You have to maintain your gear. There's no reason why 9-year-old rolling stock is going to give you headaches if it's maintained well. You do have to bear more of a maintenance burden, but it's only a significant burden if it's unattended. So
Nationals may have newer, better fleet, but the independents can keep up with service. And if you can deliver a superior customer experience, customer service, then you can maintain price integrity that's closer to the bigger national players. Is that fair?
That's absolutely fair. And one of my favorite examples is a friend of mine up in Canada here. He runs an equipment rental store where, against the Nationals, like, he's in a pocket of the country where they're all there. He's the highest performer, largest location, most equipment, and it's because of service. He's like, let's go down the service path all the way. There's a local market demand for 24-hour service calls, and so he's the only one that can, because public companies are restricted in the service standards that they can provide because they're franchised. Well, they're not franchised; they're public companies, but they have to uphold a certain level of service standard, but not beyond. And so he throws down the services, and everybody wants them. And here's the kicker: is his prices are probably 40% more than the Nationals.
And they have worse, older equipment, but 40% higher prices because they offer 24/7 service that the Nationals can't beat. Is that right?
I'd say it started there, but the equipment isn't. I think you said worse. That he's now evolved, like with
Yeah.
price, with his opportunities and his performances. He's able to buy newer equipment. So he's moved from tier 3 up to tier 1, really. So now he's playing with the tier 1s, but he's an independent operator. So yeah, that's actually a great example. I'm glad you asked that question, so I could bring that up. Okay, so let's see what slide we're on here. It gives you the clear indication of where to look. Yeah, this is all part and parcel of what we're talking about. Better capital investment decisions. Do you buy new? Do you buy old? That's what that's all about. So let's say that we do have that. We have all of our hierarchy of data is categorized, it's clean, it's clear. Internally, the team is empowered. Externally, your customers, perhaps with their website, they can understand the hierarchy of your catalog easier. And you've got a resilient fleet that allows you to survive during market downturns or local market downturns. The average age of your equipment isn't so old that it can't be generally, it isn't so old that it can be lesser maintained. You're not buying so much gear because you're cash strapped. The average age is healthy enough that that whole binomial curve looking shape can slide backwards and you'll be okay. All of that's in place. You've got a mixture of new, a mixture of old if you do choose to exist in the tier 3 or tier 4 space or tier 2. Now maintenance. Like I said, if you are maintaining your equipment, we all know that we need to maintain our equipment. It's not rocket science, but it's an enabler. When you have a maintained fleet, it enables you to maintain an older fleet. So what we want to do is absolutely first thing to cut out is leaving the on-fire maintenance strategy behind. That's like, it's on rent, get it on rent. Like I used to hear it from leadership in my organization, get it on rent, get it on rent, get it on rent. And you would, and your utilization is extremely high, but two problems. Now new customers can't buy anything because we're so cash strapped that everything's on rent and we're maintaining everything that catches on fire. Sometimes literally catching on fire, that we can't buy new equipment with the cash that we're earning because we're spending it all on maintenance. And what's even worse is that the equipment that is on fire, because of our high service standards, needs to be replaced with other inventory that's in stock. So we're losing inventory availability at like 100% rate to every on fire maintenance record. So that's what I'm saying here. Assets go down, need to be replaced, and availability goes down. Yeah, utilization suffers. Like you've actually got 10 pieces of equipment. 5 of them are earning rent and discounted rent. if 5 of the service calls have come up, your utilization, your financial utilization, and your time utilization is getting hammered. And there's just so much. Like it's bad enough to have 2 pieces of equipment on a customer's site to keep them happy, and they're grumpy, so they're paying less. And on top of that, the gear that is the backup gear is not earning revenue. So like on fire maintenance, we know it's bad. Like it's just by virtue of the name, and it just sounds bad. Like it's like 4 compounding issues that are keeping you down when you're deployed like that. So proactive maintenance plan, preventative maintenance plan, there's lots of names to generally describe the same thing. It's scary for let's say the tier 4 company, if I'm going to assume that the cash strap company is the bootstrap company. It's the generally one leader that's commanding everything. How do you possibly run a maintenance program? Start at the manuals. It actually is a challenging thing to exist in the tier 4 space, tier 2, 3, 4 space where you have used equipment, because it doesn't get shipped with manuals anymore. It's like you actually have to track down the manuals, and for whatever reason the manufacturers like to have them tied into their new purchase portal. So there's a big one, is tracking the manuals, get the manufactured recommended maintenance plans. There's arguments to make about it being like over maintained, but honestly, if you're maintaining to the status quo, that's a heck of a lot better than the on fire maintenance. The revenue that you're going to get back is far greater than the lost opportunity that you lose when things are on fire. Use your rental software. Like I have seen a lot of clients that have very capable rental software that it just hasn't been populated. It's like add maintenance interval, and that's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be like this mainframe maintenance platform that's super complicated. Like it's like you could use a spreadsheet for it for goodness sake, but it's nice when it's integrated into the software, because then when the equipment comes back, it just says, by the way, we're at a point where you need to give this a little bit of attention. And my advice is, don't give it a little bit of attention, give it all of the attention. When the first time that that machine is not down, out of service, and another machine's replacing it, makes up for the amount of time and energy and effort and cost that goes into maintaining it. So it hurts when it's being maintained. I know, like I've seen equipment lined up for maintenance, but the opposite is worse. I promise you, the on-fire challenge costs you more. Integrate maintenance checkpoints in your business. I like this one. I'm starting to lean into like a whole nother, strategy here. So I'll pull in the reins a little bit, but processes in your company. Look at your rental out process, which I will just describe as a piece of equipment that's going out on rent. Are they writing down what the filter hour meter, the filter hour meter reading, or literally the hour meter reading on a document or in the app or what have you? It's amazing how equipment gets delivered when it's overdue for maintenance. And that's just to say there's another process that's not working well or perfectly, but it's great to capture it then. At least oops, this is supposed to go out for 6 months and it's already overdue. You can start planning and stop that on fire from happening. Same thing goes on the way back. Just double down. Make sure you're looking at these things in a couple places rather than just in one place at a time. What do we got? KPIs to assess your maintenance strategy. So I've got a few thoughts here. I talked earlier about time utilization. You look at it at the asset category level, look at it at the asset class level, look at it at the assets level. They all offer up like tons and tons of information that you can use. Just to reiterate, at the class level, at least we know our coring machines are, underperforming our demolition machines. If we're talking concrete, why? Drill down one level into the 2 to 5 inch coring machine. Why is there more revenue coming out of that machine over the next? And therefore, should we have a fleet that's shaped a little differently? Can we afford, with the additional cash flow and revenue from one asset category, asset class, so that we can expand into an opportunity of having another asset class that we didn't think, or it doesn't perform as well. Like breaking into new markets, that's a great way to find cash flow, to afford loss leaders. You might have heard of loss leaders, something that isn't turning the revenue that you need to justify it unto itself, but on aggregate across the whole fleet. Now you can offer it. On fire, I keep coming back to that. How many unit down repair orders are written each week? Or just phone calls, like whiteboard emergency call. How many times did it happen this week? And then toolbox meeting Monday morning. Everybody, like front of house, back of house, 9. 9 is a number that we're not comfortable with. Well, any number we're not comfortable with, but let's collectively, in this minute in time, what can we do to get that to a 5? And there's going to be results coming from that. So that's an example of tracking, using simple analytics and converting it into process. Washout ratio, a little more, dug a little deeper into this one. Washout ratio is the total purchase cost plus the maintenance cost. So that's the burden. Purchase cost is going to include your interest rate. I think it's Dustin that asked. So bear that in mind. It's not just the purchase cost, it's the lifetime purchase cost minus the revenue and sale proceeds. You can look at this, and again, we have our hierarchy, our schema, our asset categories, classes, and assets themselves. They're clear. And so when we look at a washout ratio to a asset category, is it a similar washout ratio to all the assets, the asset classes? And again, some of the asset classes might be different. And an asset itself, you might have a lemon in there. That's when you get all the way down and you can see at an asset class that your washout ratios are consistent over time, but one of them is wicked bad. Then identify that, pull that out. It's on a month-to-month basis. You can see the trend evolving. Um, Important to think about that, important to know where to look for that, important to regularly inspect these kinds of analytics.
And
So how does
Patrick,
it all fit? Yeah.
if you just go back to that last slide, at the very bottom, you asked, do all of your assets in the asset class share a similar washout ratio? So those targets change by asset class, or is there like a global
Yeah.
benchmark we should try to hit?
Yeah. No, but well, okay. So I guess theoretically there could be, no, I take it back. There's no global benchmarks. There's the market influences um, are too strong. So your business specializes in what? Or I guess we can specialize generally in nature, general equipment rental, but the asset classes washout ratios for your, I just keep saying 2 to 5 inch coring drills. We do want to see consistency across the assets within the asset category, but you're not going to expect, there's no reason you would expect the 2 to 5 inch asset class to compare to the 6 inch core drill asset class. It's going to be different. Um,
And what
just like your
about
earth
compared
moving
to
equipment.
what about compared to like peers or competitors? Like sounds like different asset classes have different benchmarks, but is there a way for me to benchmark myself on the same asset class to the guy down the road or peers in my geography?
Yeah, I think there's, it's sort of getting into it. I'm looking at the end result, and that's using a percentage deviation of your washout ratio to your peers. Um, Actually, there's a good plug. I also facilitate peer executive group meetings with peer executive groups, Dan Crowley in his organization, where group members get together and in the spring meetings twice a year, they compare their composite books. And that's to say where their revenues are, the distribution of their overhead costs, their revenues, their net revenues, everything is shared on a percentage term basis, like a percentage difference basis, not term basis. Um, there's something I wanted to come back to touch on that. Like what's important to understand is your own trends. So like at peer executive groups, it's once a year in the spring that we look at this collectively across the other 11 group members. But unto yourself on a monthly basis, monthly is a good place to start. Um, the trend of your washout ratio, if we are just examining one KPI, and that's washout ratio, should be consistent. And that's what's going to be normal to you. Look at your peers once a year or what have you, and identify that they have a different washout ratio when you're expecting the behavior of your washout ratio to be similar. Well, then that's a wonderful opportunity to start looking inside. What are we doing differently than our peers? What are we the software is usually the first place to start, but is there a interval that's too wide for maintenance? Is there just the number of maintenance calls to an asset class, since we're looking at asset classes, that's oddly high? Data. Getting the software in, deploying the software, and getting your processes to complement your software is the first step, and then the analysis and how you operate your business. It's starting to, open more doors of opportunity to further increase your efficiencies as a business operating system. How do all your processes fit inside of your business that is headed toward your annual 5-year and 10-year goals? So you start zooming out more and more and more. You can't start here. You have to start with, do I even have assets to rent? And from
Yeah,
there.
it sounds like starting small and garbage in, garbage out. It sounds like the first thing is getting a really solid source of truth, right, with your data, making sure you're tracking things properly before you can even start running any of these metrics.
Yeah, that totally, absolutely. Source of truth. Yeah, you said it perfectly. Garbage in, garbage out. If you're renting everything generally in nature and not maintaining it, and it's getting old, or even the opposite, everything is brand new and you can't afford to maintain it. Like there has to be balance there. But the result is visiting your analytics, your KPIs, refining, your processes, um, your investments to better match where you're headed, where you want your company to go. So. yeah, that's the existential, like the big level stuff. That's the stuff that I spend most of my time on. How do you get to that 10-year picture um, from today? Oh yeah. If I go next, so this is we're sort of leading into the Q&A area here, but tie it all together. Just think about it. What we've talked about. Have your data in place. Have a resilient fleet that could age if you didn't have cash, or supply chains were affected. Can it get older in a healthy manner? And if so, like maintenance, if it's getting older, do you have the maintenance planning, programming in place to support that? And they all ebb and flow. They're all connected. You need each one to complement the other. If you have one without the others, that's not going to, provide the maximum profits. It's literally what we're doing. So my thesis in the end, the takeaway is know your data, where it's coming from, and how to analyze it. Understand that there is a difference in having like an average fleet age that varies, and how to manipulate it. Like take cash that you have to freshen it up, or let it age out a little bit if you don't. And maintenance to tie it all together. Maintenance needs data. Maintenance provides data. Maintenance of your fleet allows you to have a younger or an aging fleet, and that's it. Those three, some components, I promise you, brings you more than in revenue and opportunity than just having one at a time, thinking about them one at a time. And that's
Awesome.
pretty much it.
Patrick, thank you for diving into that. I think we're at the Q&A process, Q&A step here. So just a reminder, if people want to go into the Zoom, click raise hand or type a message into the Q&A. We can read any questions people have. We do have one from, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous attendee. What time utilization benchmarks are most important? Does it change by asset class?
Best time utilization that's most important. So the wonderful and awful thing about all of these KPIs is, like I alluded, or what I said a minute ago, it's what's good for you. Time utilization across your asset classes. So that's to say your skid steer, any class of your skid steers. 80% is a number that's thrown around the industry that's healthy. Of course, we all want 100%, but you're starting to say no to people. You can't fill in long-term opportunities. And if you were to run a model against that, it would prove out that something like 83% time utilization across an asset class is going to be very, very good to you. Whereas 100%, it's hard to grow your company because people just keep hearing no, as one example. So I guess what I told my team is, let's get to yes when we do run into utilization challenges. Like, how can you help them? Re-renting is just the coolest tool that we have as an industry, and that it's a friendly relationship to have. Lean on those re-rentals, keep saying yes, and try to get your organic fleet to accommodating that 80% plus or minus what works in your market.
Yeah, and by saying, be able to say yes with some of those re-rentals, that gets back to the customer service piece, which allows you to move up in tier level from 3 to 2, 2 to 1, and then ultimately charge higher prices to keep up with the nationals, which is something you had talked about earlier.
Yeah, thank you.
We have one more question. When we get to maintenance costs, what is a good percentage or ratio to shoot for compared to revenue? Like, what percentage of my revenue should be spent on routine maintenance in an ideal world?
Across the fleet?
And it may change by asset class, or I don't know if there's a global number, but how do you think about like a percentage of maintenance costs compared to revenue? Like, do you have any benchmarks or targets there people should think about?
I honestly never thought of it that way. Like, that is a very valid question. And if I currently had a fleet, I probably would be, thinking, that I have my own answer. But I think that response is my answer is you of course you need to pay to play. There's what it all comes down to is what's normal for your fleet. If your KPIs, let's say we have 10 numbers that we're looking at, one of them is, maintenance cost, another one is um, lost opportunities because you don't have fleet. One of them is fleet maintenance, yeah, like on fire maintenance calls, repair calls. Like if they're flat, then your answer is yes. You're doing it right. It's a problem is when you have analytical outliers that are actually indicating it. You can always aspire to bring them down, and I encourage you to bring them down. But the first thing is to have them in the first place. And when you bring your costs down to something that you're aspiring toward, and one of your KPIs, your critical KPIs, starts taking off on you, well, you know your answer. You're at the bottom. Leave the extreme visualization or the imagination of how low it can be to your quarterly company conversations, and don't try to answer that in one swing. Just I hope that's helpful. It's definitely not what you were going for, but I just know that I broke through the class ceiling of my operation several times, and it was because of this triangle. Like data, fleet, maintenance, accommodating them, measuring them all is all part of it. There's another layer to all of this is measuring these things. And when you're doing that and you have control of it, then you break through the proverbial glass ceiling. So hopefully that's helpful.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. I think my takeaway from this is focus on the asset, the fleet age, data, maintenance, get that right. Then you can deliver the superior customer service. And that is really where the margin comes from.
And that's where it takes off. You nailed it. That's it. It starts taking off on you there. Yeah.
One more question here. If a customer damages a machine, which will cause an unexpected maintenance cost, obviously I would try to bill that customer for the total amount for a repair. Do you think it's fair to bill them for the quote rental rate of the time I had to spend having the machine fixed? So if someone damages something and there's unexpected maintenance cost, should I bill them for the time that it's being fixed?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're asking. The concern there is the pain point, the customer pain point, when you say you axed my machine and I can't rent it to anybody for 45 days. Well, then what do? There's a camp belief position that is neither right nor wrong. That is that you got to charge them because there's no revenue coming in. In certain markets, that can end your relationship with the customer. It probably, well, who's to say whether it will end the relationship or not? That would be negative. What do I believe? I believe that the answer is, again, market specific, but knowledge is power. So we all, on one end of the spectrum is like this online purchasing concept. Like, I'm talking about like Amazon. Like you buy it, it shows up, it works, it breaks, and you're like, well, shame on me. I was always very concerned about my, especially new customers, showing up and that their experience, whether it's through the UI of our platforms or whether it's the phone calls or their boots on the ground interaction with the company, that it's a good experience. The challenge is getting them to understand that we offer a damage waiver and to understand the damage waiver. Like that's a tool that isn't for everyone. It can provide a lot of revenue. It should be accommodating that. So a lot of the times it gets into in the accounting perspective, it's a great account that's growing. Profit, profit, profit. But if you use that, you communicate what it does for a customer and it happens to cover that, then they're going to be very happy to have spent 12%, 4%, whatever it is. And when that happens, and then you don't mind because that account balance is probably not devastated by that. It takes, if you're, it's not insurance, but you have to build the confidence in the execution of your damage waiver to be able to use it properly. So yeah, careful how you use a damage waiver, but that is one way to accommodate that. Do I think it's right or wrong to charge somebody? I did not have a damage waiver, and my contract said that they owed it. This is all just anecdotal. It's not the right answer. I'm just relating. I generally absorbed it when it was one of my, I don't want to say tier one. I'll say my tier A customers. We had a segment of our overall percentage of customers that repeated so much business that I wouldn't be worried.
Yeah,
so just call it a forgiveness.
That sounds good. Well, Patrick, I think we're just up on time, so we'll wrap up here. Patrick, I want to thank you for coming on here and sharing all your thoughts. We'll make sure we include your contact info and any follow-up emails if anyone wants to reach out to you directly. And for the audience, thank you for attending. This is our first ever. So I think at the end of this, we'll send you access to the recording so everyone has access to this. We'll also send a survey just for feedback on what you guys liked, didn't like, and also feedback on future topics that would be interesting to the group here. And lastly, just if you found this helpful, please invite any colleagues for future sessions. So with that, I think we'll wrap up. Thank you again, Patrick, and thanks for everyone for attending.
Thank you very much. Had a great time. See you, Kyle.
Sounds good. See you, everybody.